على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us a chance to gather again in one of the houses He has set up for His worship. We ask Allah, just as He has sent down nourishment from the sky, that He similarly nourishes our hearts, so that just like He causes the plants and the trees and those types of things to grow and be nourished, that our hearts and the tree of faith in our hearts can be nourished as well. We're continuing with the story of Musa alayhi salam, looking at different aspects of his life. As we've mentioned, Musa is talked about in great detail in many different surahs of the Quran, and for that purpose we didn't figure it appropriate simply to talk about Surah Taha, even though that was the next surah in sequence, but rather to try to look at the story of Musa as a whole and try to benefit from the many different aspects of his life that we can benefit. Do you know if the sisters can see, or you know where? We've covered week 1, which was an overview of what we were going to talk about. Week 2, we're going to be covering, which is this week, we'll be covering family, the concept of family. And then next week we'll be looking at Musa's early life and his life as an infant, and also Fir'aun at that time. But this is how we plan to go over the next 9 weeks, inshallah. So before we begin, some questions that we have. You can see? Alhamdulillah. How do we determine the values of Musa's family? And we want to talk about Musa's family and the values of that family. How can we determine what Musa learned from his family? And what wasn't a part of his prophethood and messengership? How do we distinguish that information? How do we know what was a part of his upbringing versus what was a part of him becoming a messenger and receiving revelation? His home, his mother, yeah. No, his mother. What's up? They can't see now? Can they see now? Okay. So how do we do? Yeah. True, but how do we know when we look at Musa and his characteristics? How do we know which of his characteristics were developed as a messenger, and which of his characteristics were developed in the house from his mother and possibly from his father? No, but how do we know? How do we from when? Maybe my question's off. Yeah.
For instance, before he became a prophet and a messenger, he married. He had a family.
Right.
So we look at his life that he lived prior to.
Right. So anything we see as a part of his life before he became a prophet, any actions you see of his means that was probably a part of his upbringing. So it makes that period where he becomes a messenger important, because that means all of those other positive characteristics we see as a part of his life, he was taught that this was a part of his upbringing. Harun was seen on the 4th heaven following Yusuf when the Prophet ﷺ made his ascension into the heavens. He saw Harun on the 4th heaven and Yusuf on the 3rd heaven. what did Harun do of significance? I mean, there's not really a lot mentioned about Harun. Okay, perhaps his companionship to Musa. He didn't take, no? Still? It says wait for connection? Okay. So, yeah, so what did Musa came back angry. He said, Harun didn't do what he was supposed to do. So he left him in charge, but the idea is, what do we know that he's done of significance? Why was he seen in the heavens and Yusuf seen in the heavens? What was their contribution? We're going to look at that, inshallah. What quality do Harun and Yusuf both share? We'll be looking at that, inshallah. All right? So the first thing we want to look at, the first values. When we're talking about family values today. What can we learn about family values from the story of Musa alayhi salam? I mean, what are the qualities of an Islamic household? What are the types of things that we should be encouraging at home in order to try to raise children who fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who have exemplary character in dealing with society? Number one, we see that the knowledge of Allah and a relationship with Allah was very strong in Musa's household. And you see that in his mother, which is important, because the mothers are really the first teachers for the children. And so when there's not a strong knowledge base for the women in the household, then oftentimes the children lose out as well. And so it shows the importance of women being grounded in knowledge of Islam and knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so Allah says, and this is what they have. Okay. So it says, and we inspired to the mother of Musa. The term used is wahi, that we revealed to her. But several of the scholars mentioned that she was, again, inspired to, or some of the scholars seem to mention that she may have had a dream. And that seems to be more likely because it also mentions that he would be of the messengers. And we inspired the mother of Musa to suckle him. But when you fear for him, cast him into the river, and do not fear and do not grieve. Indeed, we will return him to you and will make him one of the messengers. So the idea that she was given glad tidings that he would be of a messenger, one of the messengers, seems to be an indication that she had a dream about what to do and about what would happen. And so we benefit from this. Here we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking care of her. We see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taking care of her and helping to soothe some of the grief that she had. And the idea is, when does Allah take care of you when times are bad? Or why does He take care of you when times are bad? Have they changed it from the HDMI too? Because I think they turned it. It's still on there? Okay. When does Allah help you in difficult times? Or why does Allah help you in difficult times? In the hadith of Ibn Abbas, the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, get to know Allah in good times, and He will know you in bad times. So what that seems to indicate is that the household was a religious household. It was a household where people worshipped Allah. His mother was dutiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at her level. And so because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of her. Allah also mentions in the Quran in Surah Al-Taghabun, وَمَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, that no disaster, no calamity happens except by Allah's permission. And whoever believes in Allah, Allah will guide his heart. And sometimes things happen and it's very difficult to process. And when Allah describes her own situation, when the baby was floating, when Musa was floating down as a baby in the river in a box, where did he end up? At Pharaoh's house. And that was the very first person she was trying to keep him away from. And so Allah describes her heart in that situation. وَأَصْبَحَ فُؤَادُ أُمِّ مُوسَى فَارِغًا. Her heart was empty, and she almost lost it. إِنْ كَادَتْ لَتُبْدِي بِهِ. And she almost lost it if we had not kept her heart firm. But why did Allah keep her heart firm at that critical moment? Because she had belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the first characteristic of the Muslim family is that they have a relationship with Allah and that they have knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, we have to take in consideration this household, that this was a mother who had this faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that this is not a unique event. Consider the following. Here's a story. You can fill in the blanks for me. Tell me who this is in the story. It says, when the king got to her, she got up and performed ablution or wudu. She prayed and said, O Allah, if I have believed in you and your messenger and preserved my chastity from everyone except my husband, then please do not let this pagan overpower me. And she would, Sarah, right, who follows in that line, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But look at her iman. That here she has a non-Muslim man trying to accost her, trying to rape her. And she seeks refuge with Allah by what? Her belief in Him and the messenger, and by the preservation of her chastity. That if I have believed in you and your messenger, and I have preserved my chastity from everyone but my husband, then do not let this man touch me. And so what happens? It says, and so on that, when she made that dua, the king began to choke until he could not breathe. And he began kicking his legs like someone that's choking. Seeing the condition of the king, she said, O Allah, if he should die, the people will say that I have killed him. And so he was released from that season. And it happened 3 times until finally he said, you sent me this lady's a devil. Get her out of here. And he gave her Hajar alayhi salam as a gift and sent her on her way. The idea here is that because of her iman, and her knowing Allah in good time. How? By preserving her chastity, by staying away from men who were not permissible for her, not having illicit relationships. That because of that, she used that action to call out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask for his protection, and he protected her. So it shows us the importance of modesty. It shows us the importance, because wallahi, in this day and time, there's so many challenges. There's so many opportunities to be immodest with the telephone and with the internet and with apps and these types of things. And so a Muslim has to value that by preserving yourself in that way and being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hears your dua. But it's not isolated to Sarah. Also, during those days there was no one in Mecca, nor was there any water. So he made them sit over there and placed them near a leather bag containing some dates and a small water skin containing some water, and set out homeward. She followed him, saying, "Oh, so-and-so, where are you going? Leaving," who's that? Hajar. Again, a woman of faith. You can imagine her right now, frantic. The man who is supposed to be her provider and take care of her has left her here and is turning around and walking away. But look at, first, she's a bit frantic, doesn't know what's happening. And then watch what happens when she collects herself and Allah guides her heart. Where are you going? Leaving us in this valley where there is no person whose company we may enjoy, nor is there anything. She repeated that to him many times, but he did not look back at her. Then she asked him, "Has Allah ordered you to do this?" He said, "Yes." She said that he will not neglect us. And she turned back while Ibrahim proceeded onwards. Again, difficult circumstances. But this is a family of faith, taught by a man of faith. And that this knowledge of Allah is preserved generation after generation until it's carried to the house of Musa alayhi salam. And his mother carries in that tradition of strong women. Not strong because of some job that they have or some college that they've graduated from. Not that these things are negative, but those are not where we get our strength from. Our strength comes from Iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because everybody goes through something that's hard to deal with. And if your heart's not tied to Allah, it's going to be difficult to deal with it. But if your heart is tied to Allah, then Allah will guide your heart through that situation, just like he did for these women. And again, it didn't stop at Sarah. It didn't stop with Ibrahim. He said, "I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah. And I know about Allah that which you don't know." Who said that? Yaqub. Jacob, the father of Banu Israel. So again, this is carried down family through family, this faith in Allah. And so this was a part of their household, that they had a relationship with Allah, that they knew who Allah was, that they had trust in Allah, and they taught that to their children. The next characteristic is prayer. That prayer was a part of the household. And again, this didn't start with Musa's mother. It started with Ibrahim alayhi salam. What was his dua? In Surah to Ibrahim, he said, "My Lord, make me one who establishes prayer and my descendants." And he didn't just pray for himself, but he also prayed for his family to be of those who pray. And he encouraged prayer in the house. When Allah mentions Ismail, what does he say about him? He used to keep his promises, and he was a messenger and a prophet. And he used to command his family to pray and give zakat, and he was pleasing to his Lord. He used to command his family to pray and give zakat, and he was pleasing to his Lord. So prayer was encouraged in these households. And so as we mentioned, How do we know that prayer was encouraged in Musa's household before he became a messenger? Because when he was made a messenger, before he received scripture, what did he ask for? He said, and appoint for me a minister from my family. Harun, my brother, increase through him my strength, and let him share my tasks, so that we may exalt you much and remember you much. You are of us ever seen. And Allah said, I have granted your request. كَيْ نُسَبِّحَكَ كَثِيرًا وَنَذْكُرَكَ كَثِيرًا. And if it's salah, we want to remember you much, which means that the remembrance of Allah was a part of what they did at home. That was a part of where they drew their strength. That after Fajr, they sat and they remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. After Asr, after Maghrib, before the rising of the sun and before the setting of the sun, they remembered Allah. Why would he ask for that if it wasn't something he was already accustomed to? Give me someone to help me remember you, because I know it's going to be tough. And the way that my family has dealt with tough situations is by remembering you, because that's what Mom did. And you have to believe that she told him his story and shared that with the family and shared how she felt and her own weakness and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came through. And that confidence carried over with him even in his adulthood. So prayer was a part of Musa's family. Number 3, dutifulness to one's parents. That they were obedient to their parents. That was a part of their upbringing. They were taught to be obedient to their parents. Allah mentions in Surah Taha, when your sister went and said, shall I direct you to someone who will be responsible for him? Yani when she followed her brother as his basket or box was floating down the river, and she waited till they found him and took him out and tried to feed him and wouldn't take to anyone, and they were looking for someone, then she popped up and said, would you like me to show you someone? Why was she there? Because her mother told her to go. And she said to his sister, follow him. And so she did it. And you see the confidence again this family has in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This little girl, she goes near Pharaoh's palace and feels confident enough to talk to Pharaoh's wife and the other people there, even though she's perhaps a little peasant girl there in the city. But she fulfills that duty, and she has that confidence that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to protect her. And so she does what she's supposed to do. And so we see that again as a part of some of those family values. So first is belief in Allah. The second is prayer. Third, dutifulness to one's parents. And these are not all in some logical order. These are just different characteristics that we're looking over. Value number 4, that we have siblings that seem to sincerely care for one another. That there was no animosity amongst the siblings. That they loved one another and cared for one another. And we mentioned siblings that had been mentioned before, Musa's brothers and sisters. When you look at Adam's sons, you see the enmity and the envy that was there between them. When you look at Noah's sons, there doesn't seem to be any enmity, but they weren't all on the same page as it relates to belief. But here you have a family where belief and mutual care for one another is a part of the household. He says, again, as we mentioned before, that she told him to follow him. She didn't say, why do I have to follow him? What about if something happens to me? She looked after him. She followed him until she got him back home. And also, even Musa himself, when he was given the duty of being a prophet, what did he say? He said, make my brother a prophet too. Imam Sa'di, as we mentioned previously, he mentioned, no brother has benefited his brother more than Musa alayhi salam benefited Harun, because he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make him a prophet. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answered that dua and made him a prophet. The idea here is that it's a family that cared about one another, and that love seems to be encouraged. Even at moments of anger, what does Harun, what did he say when Musa grabbed him? Son of my mother. You know, almost like a reminder. You know, this isn't our upbringing. This isn't, you know, this is not how it's supposed to go. You know, so the idea that there was care, there was love, there was compassion there as a family. Value number 5, a knowledge of oneself and history. It says that he entered the city at a time of inattention by its people and found therein 2 men fighting, one from his faction and one from amongst his enemies. Now here's a question. Where was Musa raised, alayhi salam? Where in Egypt? Where was he raised? In the house of Fir'aun, which means he was living in the lap of luxury. That if he wanted to blend in as one of the Egyptians, one of the Egyptian hierarchy, and that was the life he wanted to lead, it was well within his reach. Even when Fir'aun's wife took him, what did she say? Perhaps he will benefit us, or we can take him as a son. So it shows you the type of status he had in that household. But nevertheless, who did he identify with? With his people. Which means, again, that a part of his mother's upbringing was letting him know about who he was and about his family. Not as a source of arrogance per se, but you are who you are. You know, don't deny your upbringing. Don't deny where you come from. And what you come from is honorable. You come from a line of prophets. You come from a line of righteous people, of people who didn't commit shirk, of people who worshiped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take pride in that. Don't be deceived by those people who worship idols and are caught up in the dunya and have all those wonderful things. That's not where true honor comes from. You come from a people who believe in Allah and worship Allah alone, and who Allah, because of that belief and because of that worship, who He takes care of. And so Musa didn't have any, he didn't have any ties to the wealth, even though he grew up in it. And the only way that detachment seemed to exist is because there was education to him by his mother, an appreciation of being a Muslim, an appreciation of being a people who believe. And that's something that we have to learn to do, that we develop this sense of Islamic pride in our children, that they're proud to be Muslim, that they're proud to worship Allah alone, that they see that as superior to what other people have and what other people do. I might not have all the luxuries of life, but I also don't lower myself to created things. The money that my family makes is in our pockets. It's not in our hearts. And we don't do anything and everything for money. We have a sense of values. We have a sense of morals that we are proud about and that make us superior to other people. Allah describes those who disbelieve as what? As cattle, worse than cattle. The Muslim is better than that and takes pride in that. Yeah? And so this seems to be a part of his upbringing, that there was knowledge of who he was and pride in that, and it was encouraged to be proud of his belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Value number 6. Musa seems to have this concept of a belief in justice and supporting the weak. And that seems to be apparent when he ends up doing something that he regrets doing later, which is killing the individual that's not from his faction. He says, and one of them from his faction called for help to him against the one from his enemy. So Musa struck him and unintentionally killed him. And this is an important lesson from Musa alayhi salam, and we'll talk about it in detail a little bit later. But in his desire to support justice and to support the weak, he also learned another lesson, which is justice is not one-sided. And just because you despise a certain people for an action that they've done, or a group of people for something that they've done, doesn't allow you to now whitewash that perception on every individual and then become oppressive. Allah mentions in Surah Al-Ma'idah, وَلَا يَجْرِمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنُ قَوْمٍ أَلَا أَنْ لَا تَعْدِلُوا اِعْدِلُوا هُوَ أَقْرَبُ لِلتَّقْوَى. Don't let your hatred of people prevent you from being just. Be just, because it's closer to taqwa. And so here he sees who seems to be an oppressor and someone who seems to be weak, but he doesn't know what's going on. Perhaps that person who is from his enemy, perhaps in this instance, what he's doing is with right. But he never asks. He never finds out. He just takes things at face value. This is from my people. This is from my enemy. And he acts on impulse without looking at the issue in detail. And he ends up regretting his actions later. And that action ends up changing his life in a very negative way and then in a positive way when he repents. His whole life is turned upside down. He has to leave his home. He has to leave his country. He has to leave his family. And he goes with nothing because of one mistake. All your life you're trying to do righteousness. And then you let that one moment where you don't use proper Islamic judgment and you oppress someone. And that can follow you for a good amount of time. Again, good came from it. He became a messenger after having to flee. But he had to leave in fear and live in fear for quite some time until things were able to be rectified. Also, when he was taken care of, when he was in Median after he had fled, it said he saw the women who were standing off from the well, not able to water sheep. So he asked them what was wrong. They said, we do not water until the shepherds dispatch their flocks. And our father is an old man, so he watered their flocks for them. Then he went back to the shade and said, my Lord, indeed I am for whatever good you would send down to me in need. And so here he saw people in need, and he had the ability to help them, and so he helped them. Now these people that he helped were what? Were two women. Yeah? And Musa was a young man. Did he try to take advantage of them? Did he say, now that I've done something for you, can you do something for me? Was that his perspective? No. No. He didn't ask them for anything in return, because this is the type of upbringing he had. You help people in need, not because you want something back, because it's the right thing to do and because it's pleasing to Allah. You don't take advantage of people who are weak. You don't take advantage of people who are vulnerable just because you can. Because don't forget, just like someone else is in need now, there's going to be a time that you're in need. And just like you can take advantage of people, people can take advantage of you. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. And he knows what's in the hearts. And so Musa alayhi salam, when he helped people, he helped people with no strings attached. And again, this was before he was a messenger. So it shows that this was a part of his upbringing. That you look out for people who are in need, because Allah has looked out for you. Allah took care of you when you couldn't take care of yourself. And so you take care of others. And that's why, look, make the connection. After he helped them, what did he say? My Lord, indeed, I am in need of whatever good you have for me. I've helped your creation without asking anything from them. Now I want help from you, because you help those who help others. So just like I've helped someone, I want you to help me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped him. But he understood that lesson. You don't take advantage of people. These are important lessons we need to start conveying to our children if we're not doing that already. You don't take advantage of people. Yeah, okay, you got a little bit more, whatnot. Okay, share. Help. Look after people. Allah will look after you. Allah is going to be in your aid as much as you are in the aid of your brother. Yes?
Elders. Respect for elders.
Respect for elders. Where you see that?
The father is an old man.
Right, you see the father is an old man. Good. So also the fact that they mentioned that, and that also again explaining why they are out here. And what are these women out here doing with all these men? That wasn't something that was common and acceptable. And so even though he has no relationship with them, Musa has no relationship with these women, they want to explain to him, don't think that we're bad women. What are we doing out here with all these men? No, we're here because our father can't do this. If he could do this, we would be at home. We don't mix with men in this way. So they're giving their own excuse to explain themselves, to let him know we're not immoral, immodest women. Allah help us. Value number 7, a lack of jealousy towards one another. Again, we mentioned that Adam's 2 sons had jealousy. One of his sons had jealousy for the other. But look at what Musa alayhi salam says about Harun. What does he say? He said, and my brother is more fluent than me. He has no problem saying that his brother is better than him at something. Send my brother. My brother would be a better spokesperson for you, O Allah, because he's able to express himself better. And he's able to make himself better understood. This is a huge honor to be a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He does not let that offering of status push him towards envying his brother and hiding what he knows to be good qualities. No, raise him up. He's better than me. Choose him. He can express himself better. At least send him with me as a support because I think he can do a better job. And again, what's ironic about Harun is that who speaks to Fir'aun? Musa. And when Harun does speak to Banu Israel, they don't listen to him. And so the idea here is Allah knew what he was doing when he made Musa a messenger. If he wanted to make Musa and Harun a messenger, he could have done that from the beginning. He knew Musa could do the task by himself. But sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us what we ask for, even though we don't need it, in order to comfort us. Because it makes us feel better. It's nice to have a Lord that just wants to make you feel good, even though you don't need it. As he mentions with the angels. And when your Lord reveals to the, when Allah reveals to the angels, إِذْ يُوحِي رَبُّكَ إِلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ إِنِّي مَعَكُمْ, I am with you, so keep the believers firm. And that Allah will send down 1,000 angels or 5,000 angels. And then he says after that, but the help is only coming from Allah. So why are you sending down 1,000 angels? Because it makes you feel good. You know you got 1,000 angels around you, makes you feel a little bit more confident. But Allah's going to take care of it anyway. And so sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you what you ask for, even though you don't need it, because he wants you to feel good. And so here he gave his brother Harun to him as a messenger, as support, even though he really didn't fulfill that supportive role in the way that Musa thought he would need, but still that honor was given to him. And you see that again, Musa alayhi salam, because he asked for it when he was made a messenger, it shows that it was a part of his upbringing. If you're strong in something, admit that you're strong. If you're weak in something, admit that you're weak. And that's why when Musa alayhi salam, when he met Al-Khadr, after 3 times he said, this knowledge isn't for me. I don't have patience for the knowledge that you have. I'll leave that alone. You know, this is not, knowledge is not for me. No. Value number 8 is that above all things, religion takes priority. It's above nationalism. It's above family. That nothing comes between my relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so, even though they're brothers, when Musa thought that Harun alayhi salam had not upheld what he was supposed to uphold as it related to the religion. Oh, Ya Harun, what prevented you when you saw them going astray from following me? Have you disobeyed my command? Brotherhood stopped. When it comes to this religion, no, brotherhood and all that stuff goes out the door. We got to practice what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to practice. And when Musa returned to his people angry and grieved, he said, how wretched is that by which you have replaced me after my departure? Were you impatient over the matter of your Lord? And he threw down the tablets and seized his brother by the hair of his head, pulling him towards him. Harun said, son of my mother, indeed the people oppressed me and were about to kill me. So let not the enemies rejoice over me, and do not place me among the wrongdoing people. Musa was wrong, but he was upset for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And again, you see the idea that for him, religion was first, above family ties, above cultural ties. When he killed that individual, and he realized that he had been oppressive and had not followed Allah's laws, what did he do? He sought forgiveness immediately and asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save him from the punishment. Value number 9, and we cannot emphasize this enough, modesty. Modesty. That modesty was a part of his upbringing. First of all, the idea that he was attracted to modest women. Allah gives you, when Allah gives you a description in the Quran, take the description as what he says. Everything that he mentions is purposeful. Then one of the 2 women came to him walking with shyness. She wasn't loose. She wasn't someone who was accustomed to speaking to men directly in the face and holding conversations with them and laughing. No. When she came to fulfill an order that her father gave her, her father said, go and invite him so we can feed him for doing this service for us. She still went to him shyly, with shyness. And that was noticeable. So noticeable that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in the Quran. She walked to him with shyness. And she said, my father invites you that he may reward you for having watered for us. He did something nice for her. And the natural reaction of someone doing something nice for you is that you become comfortable with them. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. No. She walked to him with shyness. And then when she came back, what did she say? When they were at dinner, she said, oh, my father, hire him. Indeed, the best one you can hire is the strong and the trustworthy. Some of the people of Tafsir mentioned that when she said this, her father became upset. He said, what do you know about his strength and his trustworthiness? She said, well, as for his strength, I saw him at the well, watering the sheep. And so I saw him with the other men. He's strong. As for his trustworthiness, number 1, he didn't ask us for anything after he did that for us. He didn't try to take advantage of us. And number 2, when we invited him to come eat, he said, I'm going to walk in front of you, and I want you to tell me which direction to go in. And again, this is a modest, modesty was a part of this household and this upbringing. And so, and it was taught. And again, he's not a messenger yet. He's not a messenger. He has, remember, he gets revelation after he gets married. He's not a messenger yet. This is a part of his upbringing. That you don't mix with women in that way. That when he had to speak to them because they had a need, he spoke to them. When he didn't have a need, he stayed away. And he saw that they had shyness and modesty too. And that's why he agreed to marry from them. And so that idea of modesty being a part of the household is important. And again, it doesn't start with him. There were people who, from his family, from his lineage, who also practiced modesty, such as Yusuf alayhi salam. What did Yusuf say? The prison is more beloved to me than what these women invite me to. And if you don't avert me from their plan, I might incline towards them. And I'm a man. All these beautiful, rich women around here, what you want? If you don't get me out of here, I'm going to be in big trouble. And that's important because in this day and time, you know, when we talk about being intellectual and educated, we have Muslims who say things like, we're mature, we're adults. Why do we have to be separated? Why do men go in this way and women go in that way? We're adults. Yusuf was an adult, alayhi salam. We're talking about prophets here. We're talking about people of righteousness. They feared for themselves falling into the forbidden. We're talking about sons of prophets, people who were told they were going to be prophets. They didn't have that sense of confidence as it related to the haram. Look at his grandfather. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ اجْعَلْ هَذَا الْبَلَدَ آمِنًا. Oh Allah, my Lord, make this land safe. وَجْنُبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. And save me and my family from worshiping idols. Is Ibrahim going to worship an idol? He broke the idols. He left his family because of idols. But a believer never feels safe from his own human nature. He never feels so confident in himself that he forgets to depend on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you see that the believers, the prophets, call out to Allah, save me from shirk. Even though they're the furthest people away from shirk. Save me from immorality. Even though they're the furthest people from immorality. And then we have people in 2018 with social media, with telephones and messages and all these types of things, who know they have conversations with people they're not supposed to be having, who are looking at things they should not be looking at, who say, we're mature, we're adults, why do we need to be separated? Allah musta'an. Allah help us. Allah help us. Ulaika alladhina, Allah says in the end of Surah, in Surah Al-An'am, when he lists all the prophets, what does he say? Ulaika alladhina hadahumullah fabihudahu muqtadih. Those are the ones whom Allah guided. So follow their guidance. This is what he says to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the ones who Allah has guided. So follow their guidance. 2018. We're mature adults. Allah help us. Allah help us. Allah help us. Allah help us. I mean, what did the Prophet ﷺ say? What did the Prophet himself say? حُبِّبَ إِلَيَّ مِن دُنْيَاكُمْ النِّسَاءُ وَالطِّيبُ. Women and beautiful fragrances have been endeared to me naturally. Not something I asked for. I'm a man. Allah has made the opposite sex endearing and attractive to me. But my joy is in prayer. And we're human beings. There are things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has naturally made a part of us being human. And we don't have to deny that. and we take the precautions that Allah tells us to take in His book. كل المؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم. Say to the believing men, lower their gaze and protect their chastity. Tell the believing women, not just for men, lower their gaze and protect their chastity. This is their directive from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's 2018. For mature adults. Allah help us. Value number 10, forgiveness. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Shura, and the retribution for an evil act is an evil one just like it. But whoever pardons and makes reconciliation, his reward is with Allah. Indeed, Allah does not like those who oppress. He does not like the wrongdoers. When evil is done to you, then the reward for that, yani what's fair is that evil be done right back. But whoever forgives and overlooks, then his reward is with Allah. What does that have to do with the story of Musa alayhi salam? And when Musa returned to his people angry and grieved, he said, how wretched is that by which you have replaced me after my departure? Were you impatient over the matter of your Lord? And he threw down the tablets and seized his brother by his head, by the hair of his head, pulling him towards him. Harun said, O son of my mother, indeed the people oppressed me and were about to kill me. So let not the enemies rejoice over me, and do not place me amongst the wrongdoing people. Where do we see pardoning and forgiveness here? Harun. Harun was oppressed. Musa roughed him up and grabbed him up without any right whatsoever. Embarrassed him. He did this in front of everyone. And Harun tells him, don't grab me. It wasn't me. They oppressed me. Don't make me like them. What is Harun's relationship with Musa after that? Does he hold a grudge? He forgives him. And perhaps that is the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him from those people that Allah subhanahu that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam met in the ascension to Jannah. And because of that pardoning, that he was forgiving of his brother. And this is a characteristic that he shared with who? Yusuf alayhi salam. Again, from that line. Yusuf alayhi salam also pardoned his brothers when they oppressed him. And he was also from those people that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam met in his ascension to the heavens. He met Yusuf alayhi salam, and then after that he met Harun. Yusuf was in the third heaven, and Harun was on the fourth. But forgiveness and pardoning of one's brother, again, seems to be a part of that rearing. He didn't hold a grudge. He was oppressed. He was wrong. And if he had answered that wrong with similar, he said, I'm upset with you. I don't want to talk to you. How dare you embarrass me? You didn't even ask me. You didn't even hear my side. You just made assumptions. He forgave you. Let it go. And so again, this appears to be a part of the upbringing. And again, it's something, a tradition carried along with the family. Finally, the last value that we'll look at, inshallah, is work ethic. Musa grew up where? In a palace. Do people in palaces have to work? No. But Musa seems to have had the concept of work ethic. He said, the individual in Midian, indeed, I wish to wed you to one of these daughters, 2 daughters of mine, on the condition that you serve me for 8 years. But if you complete 10, it will be as a favor from you, and I do not wish to put you in difficulty. You will find me, if Allah wills, from amongst the righteous. And so Musa works for 8 to 10 years. He's not afraid of work. He understands it's not just get married for nothing. No, I have to work, earn a living, show I can take care of a family. And he does that. 8, 10 years, he works. And so even though he grew up in luxury, the idea and the concept of work, and that a man is supposed to work and earn a living and know how to take care of himself, it's not a foreign idea to him. It's a part of his upbringing. It's a part of what seems to have been taught to him in his home. And so these are 11 characteristics that we've looked at as it relates to Musa alayhi salam and his family. And we see that, again, there's no real indication of where his father fit into the picture of this story. But we do see a mother. And that mother passed on, seems to have passed on some important character traits, some important values, an important set of morals that she, by Allah's permission and with Allah's success, passed on to her children and that they benefited from in their adulthood. So it's important for us to look at these characteristics, to try to work hard to make sure that we are encouraging this type of behavior in our own families. I mean, and again, the end result is in Allah's hands, but at least we make an attempt as parents to pass on these values, that we teach them that these values are important, that we show them the examples of these values in the Quran and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of and lifted these people who were distinguished by these noble and moral characteristics. So we'll be stopping with that, inshallah. And as mentioned previously, in the next lesson, which will be in week 3, we'll be looking at the early life of Musa alayhi salam. We've talked about the family. We'll be looking more at his infancy, as well as more characteristics of his mother, and as well as some characteristics of Fir'aun himself alayhi salam. And Allah knows best. Subhanahu wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima kathira.